planning for my next guest, and I'm a little nervous because my next guest is an insider in the food industry and has worked with some incredible chefs and has worked on incredible cookbooks. And so I'm a little intimidated to cook for her. So I think I'm going to go pretty simple. I'm going to start, it's spring here now and nice veggies are happening. So I'm going to start with a spring salad with just some fresh peas and radishes and red lettuces and a little shaved fennel. And then I'm going to do something kind of cozy and warm just because I'm not like a super technical chef. So I'm going to do a braised lamb shoulder with root vegetables. And I'm going to let that cook for a really, really, really long time with lots of nice cooking liquids and root vegetables in there and herbs to give it a lot of nice deep flavor. And I'm going to do a side of creamy polenta and then some sides of just like roasted veggies. So I'm going to do some roasted leeks, some carrots, some roasted asparagus. And then I'm going to do a dessert. I just actually did this. It was super fun for my daughter's birthday. I bought really beautiful little silver ice cream cups and I did a little sundae bar. And I think I'm going to do just like beautiful, really high quality, nice vanilla ice cream. And I'm going to do some crumbled up cookies and some fresh fruit and, sort of like higher end toppings. I don't know. I just think that would be fun and springy feeling. My next guest does not drink alcohol. So I think I'm just going to stock the bar with like tons of fun sodas and fun mocktails and sort of flavored seltzers and all that kind of stuff because I'm not quite sure what she likes to drink. And for music, I'm going to go a little like Lauryn Hill. And I'm going to go a little, maybe a little Sade and a little Desiree today. My next guest is wise and honest and very, very funny and has quite a story to tell. And I'm so, so excited for you to get to know her. So let's dig in. Hi, everyone. I'm just popping in really quickly before this episode starts. A couple things. We are going to talk about substance abuse issues in this episode. So if that's not something you want to listen to, please just catch us on the next one. Also, we have some sound issues in this episode. I'm so sorry. We had some engineering stuff happen with our equipment. Our amazing editor and sound engineer did everything she could to clean it up, but there are some funky spots, which normally I would not air, but this episode was so good that I didn't want to try to re-record it. So thanks for your patience and thanks for tuning in and enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Eat My Words. I'm a little nervous today because I have the pleasure of having a real life, bona fide professional foodie on today, and I'm just like an amateur foodie. So I'm really excited for this conversation. My guest today is a writer, an editor, public speaker, and a former cook. She earned her bachelor's degree at Cornell University, after which she moved to New York and completed the professional training program at the French Culinary Institute. Her writing has appeared in New York Times, Vogue, GQ, Food and Wine, Rolling Stone, Saveur, Bloomberg, Dissent, and Roads and Kingdoms. She spent 3 years working as Mario Batali's assistant, during which time she contributed to the writing of his books, Holiday Food and the Babbo Cookbook. She then spent nearly a decade working alongside the late author, TV host, and producer Anthony Bourdain as his right hand, including editing and recipe testing for Anthony Bourdain's Laurie cookbook. She was also an editor at Art Culinaire and Wine Spectator. She then also co-authored books with Anthony Bourdain, including Appetites, a cookbook, and World Traveler, an irreverent guide, which debuted on the New York Times bestseller list at number 1. She also wrote Bourdain, the definitive oral biography, which was also a New York Times bestseller. She recently authored with Richard Hart, the James Beard Award-winning Richard Hart Bread, Intuitive Sourdough Baking. Her memoir, Care and Feeding, debuted last year on the New York Times bestseller list and is an incredible read. She is also a podcast host, a newsletter contributor. She has a daughter and she is a mother. Laurie Woolever, welcome to Eat My Words.
Wow, thank you. When you put it all together, it sounds impressive. I'm like, oh, did I do all that?
You actually did. Isn't that fun?
over the course of many, many years.
Yes. You've had a long and windy road, but many, many, many exciting and successful moments, right? Well, thank you so much for being here today. I know you are living a very full life and it's not easy to turn everything off and focus on a podcast. So I appreciate that. I always kind of like to start with asking you, because your story is, now having read your memoir, your story is long and windy and highs and lows and dramatic twists and things. But I always like to start with a question of where would you say your story began?
I would say that my story began really in upstate New York, outside of Syracuse. I grew up in a small town and always had creative ambitions and wanted to perform or write or, do something that was creatively fulfilling for me, even as a young kid. But I also was raised by very practical parents who made it clear that you had to earn your own way and that whatever flights of fancy you might be on, that it was really important to be able to pay the bills and to have a backup plan. There was always this thing about athletes, well, maybe he's a great college athlete and he'll go on to the NBA, but he's got to have a backup plan. This was like a kind of a constant refrain. So I think I resented that a little bit, but I think it ultimately was extremely valuable to understand that it's wonderful to want to be a poet or a dancer or an actor or whatever it was, but that, you had to make sure to have a solid financial base.
Okay. And did your parents foster that creative side of you as well? Like, okay, they gave you the practical, pragmatic advice, but was it, I think about this a lot because I'm a mother of 2 daughters and one is wildly creative. And I always think about like, am I making sure that she knows that she can be a creative spirit and like live a life as a creative person? Was that something that was in your home, or was it really just you getting in touch with that side of yourself?
I would say that my mother definitely encouraged that. She was one of my earliest audiences for whatever, storytelling or jumping around the living room. I think it gave her a lot of pleasure. I think she was someone who also was creative. She would write these little poems for your birthday or Valentine's Day. She was very funny and loved to entertain. So I think she was very, very encouraging. She and my grandmother, we were this little kind of pod of, telling jokes to each other and funny voices and whatnot. My dad was a little more, and he is a little more serious. But, as I've now written and published books and done what I wanted to do, he's the first one to say how proud he is, and he thinks it's amazing. And it's so, what an amazing thing it is as a parent to see your child actually succeed at the thing that they want to do. So I think he, as many or most men of a certain age, early boomer, sort of cusp of the greatest generation, older men, not great at expressing their feelings as parents or probably as partners as well. But as he's gotten older and softened up, I think it's clear that he also supports me as a creative person.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you left your small town and you went to Cornell.
I did.
What was that like?
Oh boy, it was great in a lot of ways. I didn't know anything about the world. I graduated high school with maybe 125 kids, and that seemed like a lot of people to be in one place at a time. So then to get to this campus where I think there were like 15,000 students between undergrads and the various graduate programs, it was like moving to a city in a way, but in a sort of contained, focused way. I got a lot out of it. The people I met, the diversity of viewpoints and backgrounds and education and experience, the education itself, although it's not like I remember my biology 101, but I was able to take a lot of creative writing classes and a few literature classes and those things, just the opportunity to be allowed and encouraged to think critically and to dive into a text and to write your own poetry and all that just felt like a real privilege. Some of my best friends remain the people that I went to college with, which I think is very normal. Yeah, it was great. And it also was very, very humbling. And I'm not sure that I necessarily needed to be humbled, but I was. I went from being top of the class president, overachiever, good kid, to just kind of average. That was extremely academically rigorous and competitive and serious. I really had to work hard, and I really had to, make choices. I thought, well, I'll get there. I'll be in the choir and I'll be on the newspaper and I'll, have a part-time job. The only thing that I was actually able to do and keep up with my work was a part-time job. They're just there. And I am in awe of those people who were able to, edit the daily newspaper or play a sport or do something that required any of their time, because I was just really studying all the time to keep up and goofing off too. But yeah.
Okay, so graduate from Cornell and then you decide to move to New York City, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And pretty quickly thereafter went to the Culinary Institute?
So actually, it took me 2 years. I moved to New York. I had a job at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, which was supposed to be, I think, a 6-month paid internship. And I think I lasted a little less than 2 months. I just felt like this isn't for me. This is a great opportunity if you want to go into the world of horticulture and public gardens and all of that. And I kind of knew that it wasn't in the path for me. So I got a job with a family looking for a private cook. They didn't need or want someone with a lot of training. They just wanted someone to do the very simple mid-90s fat-free food. Yeah, that was very much, the Vogue at that time. And I was able and willing to do that. They also really valued education. They wanted the people, even the people that were nannying their children and managing the household and all of these things that didn't necessarily require a great deal of education. They wanted Ivy League, specifically Ivy League graduates. So I was one of the few people who didn't have an advanced degree. So I was their private cook for 2 years. And that was a great experience in a lot of ways, but it also made me hungry to actually learn how to cook for real. I could cook as well as I could with no training, just reading cookbooks and trial and error, but I really enjoyed cooking. And so I went to the French Culinary Institute in 1998.
Oh my God, your story about the fat-free Ready Whip or whatever, listeners, if you have not read the book, you have to go read the book because it's hilarious. Yeah. Okay. So they basically were not asking you for any culinary magic in there, just low fat, fat-free, bland cooking, but it ignited the bug in you. It ignited the cooking fire in you.
Absolutely. I think it was a mistake in some ways because I thought, I'll go to cooking school and I'll get to do this kind of relaxed, easy, feel good. What I really liked was cooking at home. And I didn't really think it all the way through that cooking in a restaurant professionally is a very, very different thing. And I'm glad that I didn't really think about it or really didn't talk to too many people. I think I probably would have easily been dissuaded if somebody said it's really hard and it's really hot and it's really...
You're going to do the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah, it's low pay and all of the things. I think I was a little bit, hand over ears, didn't want to know because I just wanted to do this thing. Once I got to cooking school, I realized, I'm not sure that I'm cut out for this. My career has been a series of, let me try this thing and then decide that it's not for me. So, even cooking school, which the stakes were low in terms of, you could make mistakes, but even that context where it was hot and it was, you were sort of jostling elbows with other people to make sure that you got enough eggs and enough space on the burner and that you got the attention of the instructor. And even that was not ideal for me. But, I paid for this education. I was going to see it through. But I struggled, and I write about this in the book, I struggled all the way through sort of with this anxiety of, once I get out of school, I'm going to have to go work in a restaurant. And I'm not sure, I'm sensitive and lazy and I don't like to sweat. And, what have I done? And I did talk to various people at the school about, what else can I do? And at that time in 1998, we didn't have the same kind of media landscape where there were a million jobs where you could go into media or you could go into these auxiliary positions around cooking. It was pretty much like, you've got to go work in a restaurant. That's what you've trained to do.
I thought that was so interesting too. When you were sort of thinking maybe I could be a food writer, maybe I shouldn't be a chef. And that basically everyone's answer to you was you can maybe be a food writer eventually, but no one's going to take you seriously if you haven't worked in a restaurant, if you haven't actually done the thing. Which I feel like I didn't really think about that for food writers. I thought people who became food writers were food writers and people who became chefs were chefs or cooks,
Yeah, and I think that has changed. I was just talking to someone last night about Helen Rosner, who's the food critic at The New Yorker, and she's a friend of mine, and she is such a brilliant writer and just she knows so much about food and restaurants and cooking, and she's a great home cook, but she's never worked in restaurants, as far as I know. But it actually, I think, is important for her as she's a critic. She's not coming from the same, so she has this wonderful remove, I think, that's necessary for a critic. So, and I do think that culinary schools and the rise of television, food television, and the rise of popular culture interest in food really led to a whole class or crop of people who didn't have to stop in restaurants. They could go straight to Food 52 or Eater or, any of the television shows about food. I do think we're actually kind of past that point in media now, which is unfortunate. There's been a lot of websites closing, magazines folding. There's a lot fewer television productions being made, but there was a moment from the late 90s until maybe 5 years ago where there was just endless opportunity in food media.
Yeah. Although I do have to say, I still think that everyone in the world should work in a restaurant at least once in their lives. They don't have to work in the kitchen, but they have to work in a restaurant because my husband is a very enthusiastic home cook and he's very, very good, but he's never worked in a restaurant. And I'm like, you have no idea what goes on back there. Like, I worked in restaurants a lot. And I always say, I think the world would be a kinder, gentler world if everyone had to work in a restaurant, at least for 6 months.
Yeah. And we would all be better informed and probably more empathetic diners.
You'd be a better customer. You'd be a better human on the planet. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you make it through. It's 2 years at the Culinary Institute, right?
No, it was a 6-month full-time program.
Okay, so 6 months at the Culinary Institute, you make it through, even though you're realizing this is not really what you want to do. And then what happens next?
I did have a few false starts. I worked briefly at a job that I was fired from because I was absolutely not qualified. I was hired as basically a salad cook and then immediately got promoted to pastry chef. And I just was so unbelievably out of my depth. So I was humiliated and also hugely relieved to be fired after probably less than a week. And I went on a few other job interviews, but the job that I ended up getting was as the assistant to Mario Batali, who at that time had just opened Babbo restaurant. It had been open for maybe 6 months. He had just published a book and he had just returned to cable television after maybe a year off. And so he was really poised for a meteoric rise in his career and his profile on all levels. And so it was I don't think I had any idea what an exciting and incredible opportunity it was at that time. I just thought, well, here's this guy. He needs an assistant. I can do the things that he wants. I understand food. I understand restaurants. And he didn't want me in the kitchen, which was great.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Although I did end up at some points doing, out of house events. I would help out if they needed an extra pair of hands. I did do a couple of weeks in the kitchen at Babbo when somebody quit unexpectedly. But mostly my job was not cooking. And so for 3.5 years, I was his assistant and just doing different things every day, depending on what was going on. I would go with him to the television set. I helped him with his books. I would sometimes answer phones at the restaurant, check coats, pick herbs, kind of whatever needed doing.
And I was working in the restaurant industry at the same time. And it was I don't know if it's changed much, but it was certainly a different era. Mm-hmm. And you talk about this in the book. And obviously since then, there's been a lot of attention around much of his behavior and some pretty serious accusations around women and how he treats them and some pretty rough stuff. At the time, did you have a sense of that? What was it like on a daily basis? Did you like your job? Was it hard? Was he creepy? How did that all at the time? Because I feel like I have moments where I'm in hindsight, at the time, I didn't really register a lot of the crap that was going on with men and being creepy to women. And then in hindsight, I'm like, Jesus Christ, I can't believe I put up with that. So at the time, what was happening for you there?
Yeah, it was sort of all of the above. Yes, I knew he was creepy from the jump, but it felt like, well, this is what it is. This is how men are. This is what the restaurant business is. I was 24 when I started working for Mario. And so it just felt like part of the territory. But yeah, on my first day, and I read about this in the book, he said something kind of inappropriate to me and sort of made a gesture of come, cuddle up to me. And I was like, this is my boss. I'm supposed to cuddle with my boss? That's gross. So I was aware of it all of the time that I worked for him. And I did what I could, or what occurred to me to sort of, I don't know, stay safe seems too strong a statement, but to just sort of keep it at bay. He did grab me one day at work, and without even thinking, without even taking time to process what I should do, he grabbed me, he walked away, and I went up to him and I just said, hey, don't ever do that again. And then I got scared because I was like, oh no, I've called out this behavior and what's going to happen to me. And to his credit, I guess, he didn't do it again. So that was the atmosphere that I was working in. That being said, I loved my job. It was so much fun and I was learning so much, and it didn't bother me that much most of the time. In hindsight, I look back and I kept journals, and I, would email with friends about what was going on. And there were some moments I saw him behaving pretty badly toward other people that I would clock and go, oh, I don't really like that. But there's such a massive power imbalance. What are you going to do? Especially then, I think it's a little different now, but there was no sense of, oh, if we all, band together, we can change this. It was like, yeah, if we all band together, we're all going to lose our jobs.
We'll all get fired, and we all are living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, or we'll be blacklisted. So yeah, it was a complicated time. I will also say that I think in the case of Mario, and it's probably the case throughout, the spectrum of men who behave badly at work, the more he got away with, the more he pushed the boundary. So I was there in, 1999 to 2002, and, things were at a certain level. The stories that I have heard from subsequent years, I think things got uglier and grosser and more extreme. But I was not around for those Spotted Pig days. If you're familiar with the whole story, a lot of bad stuff went down at the Spotted Pig restaurant, which wasn't open when I worked for Mario.
So you think things like escalated after you left? You think he got more ballsy with what he would attempt to do and what would happen to the victims?
Yeah.
Okay, so you worked there for 3 years. You loved your job, but it was complicated. I think many jobs in the late 90s, early 2000s were that. It was like you loved your job. You were in proximity to something so exciting, and the pace and the exposure and all that. And then it's like also the dark side of it. And I think that was very, similar to my experience in the fashion world too. It was just a different time. Okay, so you're there for 3 years-ish. And then what happens next? What do you do?
So I decided to leave without a real plan, but I thought, I need to either get out or I need to really dig in and make this my whole career. And I couldn't really see that there was a path to advancement beyond being Mario's assistant. So I quit. I started doing a sort of combination of freelance writing, which I had started doing working for Mario. And, I got a lot of contacts and made relationships with editors. And so I did a lot of freelance writing, and I also started doing a lot of catering cooking, which you could pick up shifts just as a prep cook or a party cook. I took on a few private cooking clients. So it was just kind of a patchwork of the two things I loved doing, writing and cooking. I did that for a few years. Financially, it was not great. So then I started looking for a job, and I ended up working as the executive editor at Art Culinaire magazine, which you mentioned at the top of the show, which felt very strange because I had no experience as an editor whatsoever and not much experience writing, really just a few years. But it was a very small publication. And I think it really spoke to the power of the boldface names that I had been associated with, that the fact that I had worked for Mario and done some books with him. I had also in that period started working with Anthony Bourdain. And so he put out his first cookbook, Anthony Bourdain's Leal cookbook, and he hired me to help him with recipe editing and testing. So I had these two major forces on my resume, and it turned out that was enough for the publisher to overlook the fact that I really hadn't been in charge of anything.
And interestingly enough, Mario gave you the recommendation to work with Anthony, right?
Yes. Yeah. They had met somewhere in the sort of chef social world, and Mario knew I was leaving. I gave him a 1-year notice because I knew how important loyalty was to him. And I wanted him to, really understand that this was a decision that I wasn't taking lightly, and that I was leaving because I wanted to be a writer, not because I was going to take all of his trade secrets and go work for someone else. So yeah, he connected me with Tony and recommended me to the job. And that was, one of the best things anyone could have ever done for me, professionally speaking. So I worked for Culinaire magazine for 2 years, which was very interesting. I learned a lot. I got to travel around, talk to chefs. We did these incredible photo shoots, big full color, glossy pages that were, one dish with the recipe kind of as a little sidebar. So it was sort of, to call it food porn is a bit of a cliche at this point, but that's really what it was. And chefs really took it as a badge of honor and something that they really would strive for, to be in this magazine, which is still being published, although I have to say not by the publisher that I worked for. It was acquired by someone else who's doing a beautiful job with it now. And I think she's a much more humane employer and person than the guy that I worked for. So I did that for 2 years, and then I moved on to Wine Spectator magazine. And I was there for a few years. I was working on the web. This was at a time when I think print hadn't quite taken the nosedive that it's now taken. And print was the golden child, and the web was kind of this reluctant stepchild that they would allow to, toil in their presence. So there was a real hierarchy within the office and within the company. So I was an associate editor on the web. Again, learned a lot, learned about the whole back end of websites. I learned a lot about wine and publishing, and I was just so thrilled to be working in Manhattan. The Art Culinaire was published in New Jersey, about an hour outside of New York. So I was commuting to Morristown, New Jersey every day from the East Village. And so that was just a real drag after a while. So I was really happy to be back in Manhattan and, working a real magazine job, which was just kind of all I ever wanted. And so I did get to have that experience.
It's so interesting too, because it just feels like such a different time. Like back then, the fact that you had worked for these two powerhouses in the food industry was like enough to get you these jobs. Not that you didn't deserve it, but it's like that back in the day. I mean, I had like a similar experience where my first job out of college was at Prada, which is like the equivalent in the fashion world. And it was like, it didn't matter what I did. I could have been scrubbing the toilets there, but that people took that as a real calling card and the opportunities because of it, and I think it's just interesting now, like in the world of social media and like in the world of like everyone learning everything on AI and all these things, and you have to learn how to do all the things. It's like back then it was like you had to have worked for someone generally probably very difficult and high powered, and then you could do anything.
Yeah. It's incredible. Yeah. I don't envy anyone that's in the workforce right now. I don't know what it is. I have very smart and very experienced and wonderful qualified friends that have just been looking for work for a very long time. And it's just like, what?
A different landscape.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you were working at the magazine, and you had started already working with Anthony Bourdain with recipe testing on his, was that his first cookbook? Was Leal his first cookbook?
Leal was his first cookbook, yeah.
And how did you make the jump to working with him?
So in all of this, I met the man that I would eventually marry. We got married. Shortly after that, I had a baby. And when I got back from maternity leave, I was at Wine Spectator. I had negotiated a 4 days a week, pay cut, lost my insurance, but I was allowed to work from home for 1 day, which doesn't sound like a great deal, but at the time
it was, man. Yeah. Everyone was in the office all the time. Yeah.
So that worked for me. I mean, and so I had 1 day at home with my son, but it was a drag too. And then someone else got pregnant in the office, and management said, all right, nobody's going to get any special arrangements. You either work 5 days in the office or you don't work here. And I thought, well, I guess I don't work here. I was mad, and I just felt that it was unfair. And, the line was, well, we're not a family friendly company. And it's like, that's what you're going to stand on? Okay. And meanwhile, the publishers' daughters could come and go as they pleased and had plenty of family time but whatever. Anyway, little sour grapes all these years later. So I started looking for a part-time job, and I reached out to everyone in my contact list, including Tony Bourdain. I said, if you know anybody, if you hear of anything. And he was one of, I think, 2 people that got back to me. And he said, oh, as it turns out, my assistant is leaving, and, I'm looking for somebody. And would you ever consider it? I know it's probably not your dream job, but think about it. And I was like, yeah, I never wanted to go back to being an assistant, but if I was going to be an assistant, I couldn't think of anyone better to work for. So that's what I did. It was just I think my career has been marked by these a lot of extraordinary good luck, being in the right place at the right time. And then obviously knowing some of the right people. So it was just that week, he was looking for someone new. I was looking for a job, and we knew each other. And again, because I had worked for Mario, he knew that I was someone he could trust and someone that was capable of doing basically admin work for him. He just needed someone that he could rely on. So that was in 2009. I left Wine Spectator, and I ended up working with him until the very end.
Wow. So for people who haven't read the book, up until this point, if they're listening to this podcast, this all sounds super rosy and great.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you wrote about that is the harder side of this all.
Yeah.
You were struggling personally, physically, it sounds like, some pretty hard stuff while all of this was happening. And you were working like a dog and then went straight into having a baby, which I also want to talk about your postpartum experience, because that is really important, I think. So is it okay if we talk a little bit about the stuff that was going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you were sort of like the professional hazard part of this job is the drinking.
I was a high functioning and then, less high functioning alcoholic for a long time. And that was not something I would have ever called myself at that time. I didn't really think I was so different from other people, but I was, drinking a lot all the time. And it's cute and it's fun when you're in your 20s and, all your colleagues are in their 20s and 30s and you work in restaurants and it's just what you do and it's social. And, eventually people kind of grow up or their bodies tell them to slow down. And I just kind of kept going. I was a very heavy drinker. And I also was a very habitual pot smoker for decades. And again, when other people might have said, okay, well, it's enough for me, I just kind of kept doing it more and more and more and just got very, very dependent on the numbing effects of those two drugs.
And it's funny because I sort of knew how your story not ended because your life is still going on, but I knew sort of where you were today. And I kept kind of waiting for that moment to happen for you early as I was reading the book. I kept thinking now is going to be the time, because it's painful to read, you're harming yourself. It's clear you're in great pain. It's hard. And I kept thinking okay, this is going to be the time where she's had enough of it, So you go from this high functioning, high pressure, high pace, high consumption place of stuff right into getting pregnant and having a child.
Yeah.
And you say in the beginning, it's sort of you didn't like being sober. And then you sort of it was a slippery slope where it was oh, I could smoke a little pot or I could have a little wine. And you went through parts of your pregnancy, still not to the extent it doesn't sound like you were before, but still partaking. And then postpartum really back in. And I think probably a lot of that was self-medicating for your postpartum experience. It sounded like you experienced pretty intense postpartum, gripping anxiety and depression, which was very real for me as well. And those intrusive thoughts, which is so hard. And I really, really, my heart was breaking for you during that time. And I just kept thinking wow. And then she drank it away or smoked it away. I was the opposite. I went hyper vigilant because I was so freaked out by everything that I was I'm not going to I wouldn't even let myself watch TV. That's a whole other episode. I'm a crazy person. And I went into this monastic, depriving myself of anything because I wanted to be so alert. So we had a very different experience of how we medicated. I don't know, dealt, coped. What was that like? Can you talk a little bit about being home with this new baby, being terrified, trying not to rely on your normal coping mechanisms, but going back to them? What was that like? Can you talk a little bit about
it was awful. I don't know. When I think about that time, especially before I went back to work, there was some relief in having an obligation to leave the baby with someone else because I just found it so exhausting. I don't think I'm unusual in that, sleep deprivation just takes me out. It is
there's a reason why it's a form of torture.
Yeah. Yeah, just the wrecking ball to my mental health was so complete. So it was like, well, if I get to go to work, maybe I can take a little nap on the subway, or I can put my head down at my desk and I'm not worried. And I was so consumed with the baby and so kind of resentful. Anytime he would cry or have any needs, it'd be like, I just want to dissociate. It wasn't allowing me to live my normal sort of like, let me just stare out the window. Let me just get a little high. Let me watch some reality television.
He was like bringing down the vibe.
Yeah. And he was just being himself. He was being a little human baby. So I found it really, just really difficult. And I couldn't really wrap my mind around the fact that it wouldn't always be this way. I just got really stuck in the idea that like for the rest of my life, I will be hypervigilant and never have a moment to myself again. And I will always have to like, put my needs below the needs of like not really thinking through the fact that like this human is going to grow and is going to change.
You can't see that then.
Yeah. No, it was just, I couldn't see my way out of it. And it was like every hour was a year. And it was just, my world got very small. And I think it was a combination of postpartum depression, major sleep deprivation, and I don't know if to say withdrawal from my substances, because I was starting to introduce them back in my life. I will say I really didn't drink very much when I was breastfeeding. And I was, I had a weird sort of math where it's like, well, I can't really drink. And I'm also not going to take the antidepressants that were very helpful to me prior to all this because someone had said to me, well, the studies are inconclusive and it's unclear what the effect is on the baby if you take Zoloft. So I was like, well, I'm not going to do that to my kid. But I was smoking pot. So I had somehow been able to do that math in my head and be like, that's an acceptable risk because it makes me feel better. Yeah. Fortunately, my kid is great. He's strong, he's healthy, he's, smart, all these things. But I was like, well, whatever happens, I don't care because I'm going to smoke a little pot. But it wasn't until I had weaned him or really he weaned himself that I really was like, all right, well, now there's no reason for me not to just drink to excess and smoke as much pot as I want. And for a long time, I was able to do my work. And I will say that I was
a mother and could function as Anthony Bourdain's right-hand person while you were blitzed.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't drunk all day, every day, stoned all day, every day. But there probably wasn't a single day where I wasn't doing one or both of those things at some point. And I was not waiting till the cocktail hour. It was like, it's noon. And I will say in the beginning of working for Tony, I was probably underemployed. The job started out very small and got bigger as the years went on. So it doesn't take a lot of brain power to manage a Google Calendar and, respond to people's emails. And I still was doing some work for Wine Spectator. I was a contributing editor for a number of years after I left the official job. But again, it wasn't rocket science. And I knew I was underemployed. And that was a circular effect of feeling like a little bit of a loser and like I had opted out of any kind of ambition. And I was doing work that didn't feel super satisfying, but it was enough. I was making a little money. I was keeping myself busy, but it was a choice I made, and other, women were doing the same thing. And then other women had somehow figured out how to get back full time in the workplace and keep advancing and keep growing. And I guess the grass is always greener because I had more time with my kid. I had more flexibility. I still took him to daycare, but it wasn't full time. He went to daycare 3 days a week or something. So there's no right answer. I mean, this is obviously there's a huge body of literature that's devoted to, what is the right choice for a woman to make after she's had a baby. And
well, they're all kind of impossible also, right? Like none of them are great. None of them in this country are great. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just interesting because it's like so human to have made that choice. Like, yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. Like, no, I can't keep working at the pace I was working. And no, I can't be gone from my kid 10 hours a day and all this stuff. But like we as women, I think particularly in that era who defined ourselves so much by our work and our job that taking the job which ended up being like such a wonderful stepping stone for you in your writing career and all the things that came after that. It's such a good job actually for a new mom. It's so great. But like that would make you feel like a loser. It breaks my heart, right? Because it's like, it's fucking impossible.
Yeah.
Anything else, right? Like do the other thing and then you never see your kid and then you have your other, like they're all impossible choices. So So that makes me sad that you felt.
I think it's a function of me having been a very glass, 1/4 full person, just sort of like whatever I'm doing is obviously the wrong thing, very easy, very quick to judge myself and to sort of see myself in the most negative light. And then this other thing that I've heard people say for years, which is very applicable, was I was judging my insides and comparing them to other people's outsides. I have no idea how somebody else felt about the fact that they maybe had a full-time nanny so that they could keep up their jobs. And maybe they were, wishing they were me, but I was sort of wishing that I was them. And, it's an impossible equation, I think.
Yeah, I just did an episode with Melissa Petro, who's a writer who writes about shame. And she talks about basically shame being a patriarchal issue. Like it's a structural issue that we as women are basically just destined to feel shame because we're not set up to succeed. And that shame, no matter what form it comes in, whether you feel shame because you took this job that you were underemployed, or the mom who stayed as the CEO and doesn't see her kids very often, all the shame feels exactly the same to us. Mm-hmm. You can't keep up with your laundry, you feel shame. You drank yourself sick, same feeling, right? Like it's that same feeling and it does the same harm and feeds on itself in the same way. So I think that's such an interesting thing to think about. I've been thinking about that a lot just as a woman in our country and in our society, that we're kind of set up to feel like shit about ourselves most of the time.
Yeah, there's no right path that insulates you from that, the risk of shame and the feeling of failure.
And how it then is like a cyclical thing, right? I feel shame, so then I do bad things that make me feel worse about myself. So then I do the other thing that makes me feel worse about myself. And then I just keep spiraling.
Yeah.
So you ended up having a wonderful several years as Anthony's right-hand person up until the day he died, right? I mean, you're still working for him. He ended up, I love knowing this about him now after reading your book, that he was such a generous boss and that he was very supportive of your independent career and like wanting you to be a writer and help on other things. What was that loss like? That must have been really hard.
Yeah, it was so unbelievable to me for so long. It was like I had to sort of remind myself every day, like, this happened, he's gone, he did this, he made this decision, and he's not here anymore. I mean, it was, I wrote about in the book the days leading up to it. Everyone around him knew that there was a romantic crisis and that he was not feeling great. And his romantic relationship had become this all-consuming thing, sort of the energy force field of his life and his career. So it was, everyone was on high alert.
It was not super healthy at that point.
It was not super healthy. I didn't truly have a perspective on it until afterward, because I thought it was really romantic and really
it sort of is like when you're reading the book, you're like, oh my God, he's like heartbroken. He's doing the things.
Yeah. I mean, he was just so, he was a romantic. He was an old school romantic. And I don't think I'm saying anything that he didn't say himself, that it was, romantic love was so important to him. And, to have a wonderful love affair and to have that in his life was really very primary. And so this was the thing. And this was a person who, had her own issues, and they kind of just fed on each other's craziness, for lack of a better word. And so when it was good, it was amazing. And he was extremely open about it and shared on social media and would, work her into every conversation and every interview. And he had started to work her into his professional life. And then when things were bad, they were like really bad, and you could just sort of have to be there. And it wasn't just this one time. There were other times where things went off the rails, obviously not to the extent that they did at the end, but there were disappointments and frustrations and breakups. And so it was, I sort of had a bird's eye view to all of that, but I really only heard about it from his perspective. And so it was just like, God, I wish somebody would be in love with me the way he's in love with her. And this is so beautiful, and he'll do anything. And, I just wanted it to work out. I wanted him to have this thing that he was chasing. I can see in retrospect that it was sort of doomed. And in talking to other people in the aftermath of it, he knew it was doomed as well, which was not a sentiment he ever shared with me. So when he died, it just was so, unbelievable, heartbreaking, enraging, also very, very strange to be close to someone who was such a public figure and to have for a couple of days to have the whole world weighing in on it and wanting a comment. I mean, my agent, who was also his agent, very wisely was just like, don't answer the phone. You're going to get calls from the press. There is literally nothing to be gained by telling anyone anything. It's just not worth it. So that was really good advice. But just to see people I knew going on, nightly news programs, to see these conspiracy theories, which persist to this day, to have the day that he died, both Donald Trump, who was then the president, and Barack Obama tweeted about Tony and about his death. And it's just like, that is just blows your mind to have that level of world interest in someone that was a friend and a boss. And it was really, really hard. It happened to be about a month after my marriage imploded, and also within a few weeks of my therapist's husband being violently murdered. And so I couldn't have been more unmoored in my life, and just sort of like, it was just a total reordering of, who am I? Do I even exist? I'm no longer a wife. I don't have this job with this important person who I've kind of built my whole world around. I don't have my therapist to talk to because she's taking some time for herself. I mean, I took a lot of naps. I spent a lot of time alone. Yeah. I ate a lot of candy. He said to you when you called him about your marriage, and he was like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about anything. Like you deserve to have the happiness that you want. And I thought, God, what a good friend. Like, that's really cool. And the fact that he made it possible for you to rent your apartment more easily and all those things, like, that made me very happy. I thought that was very nice. Yeah, I was so lucky to have him. The order of events, I feel if I can take any sort of something good out of it, it's like, well, at least my marriage ended and I had to get a new apartment before he died. Because I don't know, if my marriage were still hanging on by a thread and I was trying to leave and then I lost my job and my financial security, I think it would have been harder for me to leave and walk away.
Yeah. Wow. So talk about bad things happening in threes. Yeah. You really had it, right? So you moved out of your house, you moved to an apartment nearby. Mm-hmm. Your marriage was ending. Your boss died. I mean, your therapist. I was like, what is happening? This is like out of a made-for-TV movie. Your poor therapist. Yeah. Husband was awfully murdered. Like, holy shit. Okay, so you took a lot of naps, you ate a lot of candy. How did you ever get back off of the couch? Like, what did you do next? Because I think I would still be on the couch eating candy.
Yeah. Well, so Tony and I had started writing our second book together, World Travel, an Irreverent Guide. And the idea was that we would it was inspired by Atlas Obscura. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So just sort of interesting, unusual things all around the world, sort of an encyclopedia of those things. And because Tony had traveled so much for television, he had decades of experiences and places and memories and photos, and obviously all of this televised content. So the idea was to sort of cherry pick the best things from all the places in the world and write about them. And someone could use that as a guide if they were planning travel, or if they just wanted to, read about his thoughts about these things with a little bit of hindsight. So that was the plan. And we had a contract with Echo. We had an outline. We had started writing the book. And so to have that structure, that was the one sort of thing that was in place when everything else fell apart, was like, well, I have a book contract.
You have a job.
I've already put my part of the advance in my checking account. I really don't want to give it back. And so I need to write this book, and, figured out with the publisher, like, is there a way forward, knowing that Tony's not around to contribute in the way that he definitely would have. He was meant to write a half dozen essays. It was going to be a different book, but this was the reality of the situation. And so just to have that work cut out for me, and to have a task where I was obligated to dive into Tony's work and to get to know him. It was painful and it was cathartic, and it really helped my grieving process to just go back and watch him and listen to him and reread his books. And then very shortly after that, I'd say within a month or two of his death, Echo, which was his longtime publisher, came to me and said, we would like you to do an oral biography of his life. True biography is going to take many years and probably the skills of a historian, and that's not what we're looking to do. We want something that gives a lot of people the chance to talk about, who Tony was and to give a more complete picture of the man. And that was, it was like, of course I'll do it, So then I had two projects.
He keeps giving you gifts from the other side, huh?
Yeah. So that again gave me the opportunity and the obligation to connect with people, some of whom I knew and had worked with closely, and many of whom I had never met and didn't even know what their connection to Tony was. But through a lot of research and talking and guidance from Kim, my agent, I did close to 100 interviews with people from all parts of his life. And I thought, well, this is a guy I've worked with for 9 years. I know everything about him. And that was so wrong. There was so much I didn't know about him. And so again, I got to grieve by getting to know him as a more complete person and his life from A to Z. I got to speak with his mother, who I had never met before. I got to be friends with his brother, who I never really had spent any time with, and childhood friends and, people he worked with all throughout his colorful career as a cook and, ex-girlfriends. And it was, again, what a gift and what a way to both keep myself afloat, pay my rent, have health insurance and all of that. And, be a good mom to my son, but also to work through my feelings of grief.
And remind me, I want to make sure I have the timeline right. By the time before he passed away, you had already gotten sober, right?
So I had quit drinking. I quit drinking in 2017, but I didn't consider I wasn't fully sober. It took me another 18 months to finally give up smoking pot. That was just the last thing that I just felt like I've got it. This is how I manage my anxiety, right? And it just was such a habit that was so impossible for me to break until finally, what it came down to was I had to get life insurance as a condition of my divorce agreement. And the agent said, well, if you smoke anything, and we do a physical and a blood test, if you smoke anything, it's going to show up and you're going to be on the hook for about $90 a month for this policy. If you don't smoke anything and you have a clean blood test, it'll cost you about $30 a month. And I went, okay.
I love that that's what finally was the thing that made it stop. Isn't that
Yeah. At first he was like, well, quit smoking pot for 2 weeks and then do the blood test. And then, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your life after that. And that was just nothing had ever compelled me to give it up for 2 weeks, which felt like an impossibly long time to not. And it was like, I had been thinking, and I knew I had to try and live life without it. It wasn't serving me. If anything, it was making my anxiety worse. And it was making it very hard for me to concentrate and hard for me to just, have a clear head. So that was the thing. I always say that insurance agent was my first higher power. And that was, and my, my cheapness, my need to save, $60 a month.
Wow. Okay. So you have these wonderful gifts to help you through your grieving process and to keep you afloat professionally. Mm-hmm. And then what makes you decide to write a memoir? Because I have so many questions about this, because it's not always an easy one to read. I imagine it was not an easy one to write. And it covers some, again, I wasn't there. I imagine it's truthful. This is some tough stuff to talk about. Did you have any apprehension about dredging it all up? What went into the decision to write your story? Because you've been writing somebody else's story, many stories at that point. What made you take the leap?
So there were a number of things. I read a lot of memoirs that covered a lot of the territory that I did. Mary Karr's book Lit, where she talks about her own drinking and sobriety, was a classic one. A lot of female infidelity memoirs, and my book definitely contains some infidelity. And that's probably the thing that is the toughest to. That talk about shame. I behaved really badly. I was not a good wife and I behaved very selfishly. So that was a big consideration. So basically my slate was cleared. I had done the world travel book and then I did the oral biography, and they came out about 6 months apart from each other and they both did well. And I felt like, well, I've got this momentum going as an author. I have a great relationship with Echo, although they were under no obligation to ever work with me again. And I had, my agent who's great. And it was like, well, yes, the world is not clamoring to hear my story, but I have a lot of stories, and I can see the whole narrative arc in my mind from young, bright-eyed, college graduate to where I am now. And let me try. There was a sense of, if I don't at least try to write this story, which I think is interesting and relatable on a lot of fronts, if I don't even make the effort to do it, I will regret it for the rest of my life. So let's see. Let me try and get it down on paper and see if I can get somebody to publish it. I will say also that my mother died in 2021. And I feel very strongly that if she were still around, I would not have yet written this book, because there's so much that she didn't know and so much that I did not wish to share with her, just because I think it would be hard as a mother to know these things about your child. And I just didn't want to get into it. And I didn't want to have to expose myself to my mother. So she did me a favor. I miss her. I wish she was still around. She also, she had a chronic illness that I write about a little bit in the book. And so in a way, it was like a relief, because she was really suffering. But so it was all of the things lined up. I had the freedom from judgment and scrutiny of my mother. I had a great trajectory going, and I had these stories to tell. And I luckily was able to find one publisher, which again was Echo, that were willing to take a chance on it. And so I did it. And yeah, it was hard in some ways. I mean, there's a lot of dreck to wade through. And I've been asked a lot, is it cathartic? Was it cathartic to write it? Is it cathartic to have it out in the world? Not really. No. I mean, I guess I feel like I have been able to put these parts of my life to bed. They feel like closed chapters, but I think the catharsis comes more for a reader that can identify with different parts of my story. I feel proud. I feel like I took all of these experiences that I had. And, I've always been writing my own story to myself in my head since I can remember, since I was 4 years old, So I feel proud that I was able to take all of that and focus and do something with it. And the feedback that I've gotten from people has largely been, oh my gosh, I can relate to this part. I can relate to that part. Postpartum, the restaurant industry of the 90s, sexism at work, having doubts in your marriage, alcoholism, whatever it is, it's been very gratifying to hear that people have found it relatable and have felt. And I love to read a book that reflects to me some aspect of makes me feel seen, as an imperfect person. So.
Is it hard? I mean, I have found this even with this podcast, because this is the first time I've ever really told my stories at all. Mm-hmm. And I find it funny when I meet, it's like on the side of the field hockey field with the moms who are like, oh, you talked about your dad dying the other day, whatever. And I'm like, oh shit, you know that about me. Like I sort of put this out into this void of a microphone, and I don't think about the fact that there's going to be people who I know and I run into on a daily basis who are going to hear it. Mm-hmm. Did you have any moments like that of moms in the neighborhood or teachers at the school of your son or anything like that where you're like, oh, yeah, now you know that about me?
Yeah. I thought about it a lot, and I was really prepared for that, knowing the kinds of stuff I was putting out. It's funny, there's a book group in the neighborhood, and one of the moms reached out to me yesterday and said, we're meeting tonight. We all read your book. And I was like, oh. So
do you want me to make a guest appearance?
So I assume, when I see people in the neighborhood that I know as a mom and as a community member, that they're like, now they know, all of my bad behavior and my shameful stuff. Yeah, I just kind of keep it in a box, And I think most people are very polite, and they're not going to say, can't believe you cheated on him, or, they might be thinking it. And I'm like a nosy, judgmental bitch. So I assume other people think that way about me. And it's, that's the price of doing something like this. But I can't quite put a finger on it, but I have sort of constructed a little bit of a barrier for myself, where I am aware that I have shared a lot and that not everyone's going to approve, and nor should they. I mean, nor should anyone try and, replicate my path. But it's okay, because to me, the thing is, I wrote the book. I did the thing that I feel like I have my whole life wanted and been meant to do. So
I want to know when someone's going to buy it for the movie rights, because I really, really, really want a movie out of it.
Yeah, you and me both. I'm working on it. I do think that the days of the easy, couple $100,000 deal are over. I had the good fortune to spend some time with Ruth Reichel, who was the longtime editor at Gourmet. She's written a number of books, novels, and memoirs. And she was telling me about the kinds of deals that she got, 20 years ago. It's put your kids through college, buy a second home money. And, the money that we're talking about now is like pay a portion of 1 month of your rent. It's totally different. And, I think there are a lot of factors, but yeah, I mean, I am hoping, and we're working on it, but it feels like
Reese Witherspoon, are you listening? Come on, buy the rights to this book. It's so good. I kept thinking about the scenes of like when you were the home cook at the fancy people. That alone is like just a great opener.
Yeah, I think it would make a great feature film, or
like you being stoned in their fancy kitchen with the snack wells and the like low fat everything. I mean, it's just so good.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, congratulations, because you did it. You published your story, and it's beautiful, and it's gripping, and it's difficult, and it's really, really, really beautifully written. So congrats on that. That's huge. I always like to ask this question, and I'm really curious because yours has been such a windy road. Did you have a picture when you were growing up in upstate New York? Like, what did like success or like having it all look like to you when you were young?
Yeah, I think at a certain age, maybe middle school or early high school, success and having it all definitely involved living in New York. I had been to New York exactly once on the art club field trip, and I was just like, I got to live here. This is the place for me. And so I think it involved living in New York, having a rich cultural life, whatever that meant, lots of friends, art, books, taking advantage of the city, and also having a loving, stable, romantic relationship. And I think that's just a function of, growing up in the era that we did, where it was, I always seem to absorb the message that like your worth is directly correlated to whether or not you have a man.
Okay.
I've tried to undo some of that, but it's, I feel better when I'm partnered, and, I do have a lovely boyfriend now who I've been with for over 4 years. And, I consider him my person that I'll be with for the rest of my life, knock wood. But yeah, that was definitely part of having it all. So I do live in New York. I do have a man.
You do cultural things.
Yeah, I do cultural things, not all the time, but, sometimes I go to a play, I'll go to a concert. So yeah, it took some doing, and it seems like we're on the precipice of a financial disaster. But for now, like, I got food in the fridge. I can pay my rent. My son's going to go to college. So it feels good.
Feels good. Do you have, because you're doing the thing, right? You're living your life as a creative person, and you're making a living doing it, and you're putting food on the table for your son, and you're thriving in New York and doing cultural things with your partner. Do you have any kind of rituals or routines to keep you grounded and keep you in the state of creative flow or business flow or whatever that needs to be that day? Because I know you have to do both, right? Do you have any things that you fall back on?
Yeah, I'm a big napper. I'm fortunate to work from home and to have the ability to nap when I feel like napping. So I do a lot of napping. I have a exercise, 4 or 5 times a week, as much as I can. I watch a lot of television, I have to say, like
really?
Not all day long, but I do. I've got my Bravo shows that I love. And then I will listen to podcasts recapping the Bravo shows. But I try and do those things efficiently. So I'll do them while I'm washing dishes. And I don't have a dishwasher, so I do spend more time than the average person washing dishes, especially with a teenage son who loves to eat. So just, to have these outlets that are kind of frivolous and don't require a lot of deep thought, that's that. And, even washing dishes. When I'm traveling and I'm in a hotel or whatever, and I don't have that control over like food preparation and cleanup, it's nice. Obviously, it's nice to not have to be responsible for cleaning up after yourself. But there's a point at which I'm like, I can't wait to get back and do dishes. There's just something that kind of like, you can let your mind wander, or you can watch The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And that sort of, whatever it is that kind of lets the brain rest while you're, sweeping the floor, whatever it is. I think that's really valuable. Yes, I would love to have the money to be able to pay someone to clean my apartment every once in a while, but I also feel a little bit sorry for people who don't have any responsibility for keeping their home and their lives in order, because I think that there's something good for the brain about those kind of mundane tasks of, self-care, if we can call it that.
Okay. You've had a lot of achievements. What is one that you're most proud of?
Well, Karen Feeding hit the New York Times bestseller list.
Sure did. It says right here on the cover, instant New York Times bestseller.
The first week it was out, and I was really uncertain. And it was something I wanted and something I was very uncertain if it was going to happen. You know, I had other books hit the bestseller list, but those, you know, one of them was literally called Bourdain, right? So
that sort of feels like a little bit of cheating, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. And World Travel was
really hard on it, but
yeah,
it's a leg up.
Travel had his name, you know, he was the major marquee author, and it was, you know, with Laurie Woolever. So I understand that there are market forces that are going to put a book on the bestseller list. And this was the first time that it was just me as an author. And I remember saying to my boyfriend, I really want to hit the bestseller list. And he's extremely realistic and he's not going to gas you up if he doesn't really mean it. And he said, it might not. It probably won't, you know?
Buddy.
Yeah. And so not only did it, but I got to call. I actually had dinner with him that night. And I was just like, I hit the bestseller list. You said I wasn't going to. So I'm really proud of that. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, I'm also proud of having a wonderful son who's about to graduate high school and seems weirdly well adjusted in a way that it's like, okay, I don't know whose kid you are, but he's got such a good head on his shoulders. He's just like happy and self-directed and nice. And so I feel really proud of that, but also my book.
Two big accomplishments.
Yeah.
Is there anything that, I imagine there is, but I don't know. Is there anything that you once believed about yourself that you've since outgrown?
Well, I believed that I needed to smoke pot every day to function. And that is not true. Yeah, I think I also used to believe that I had to take, in matters of romance and professional matters, probably in many situations, I thought I had no agency to choose and to want something better for myself, and that I would always just, whatever was offered to me I was lucky to get it, and I should take it and never ask for anything else. And that, you know, that put me into a lot of bad relationships or situationships or hookups or whatever. I just thought whoever is willing to be in a relationship with me is the last person that's ever going to go down that road. So I better take it, because otherwise I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. And, you know, that doesn't lead to great choices.
Yeah. Okay. I feel very strongly about women and mothers in particular continuing to do this for themselves. So you've now written your memoir, and it has become a New York Times bestseller. What are you dreaming about these days? Are you dreaming of anything new?
I am working on a book proposal for a second book, a book of my own that is, you know, it's about kind of what happens next. Like once a person decides to get sober and live a different kind of life, what does that look like? That was a book that I was looking for when I was thinking about maybe getting sober. I wanted to know, you know, you can read millions of books about people that have had crazy experiences and all of their drunken bad behavior, but I didn't understand what the other side looked like. And I think there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding around 12-step programs, or around, you know, the idea that sobriety can also be funny and weird and joyful. And I just thought, well, my life is going to be very black and white and very gray as a sober person. And so I'm trying to write something funny and positive that doesn't scare people off trying to get sober, if that's something they feel would be useful to them.
Okay. This is exciting. I'll have to come back on when you're publishing it. Okay, we're now at the very exciting and silly time of the lightning round of silly questions. Many of them are food related. A lot of them are not. So I know you're very thoughtful and you care deeply about words and things. Don't think too hard about this. This is not a test. Favorite comfort food?
Vanilla ice cream.
Ooh.
Yeah.
What was your first paid job? First time you ever exchanged work for money?
Babysitting.
What is something you're really good at?
Sleeping.
Love it. What is something you're really bad at?
Running.
Oh, someone else just said that recently. Mm-hmm. Favorite word?
It's probably either shit or fuck. I don't know. Can we say that on your podcast?
Totally can. You can say it so many times. You can yell it from the rooftop if you want. Okay. Least favorite food. I mean, in the book, you talk a lot about like all the exciting things that you did, all the exciting foods you ate. But is there one that's like a deal breaker?
Canned peaches.
Canned peaches?
Disgusting. Ever since I was a little kid, just like, what are we doing here? Like, what did you do to this perfect fruit? It's so, just the stringiness and the wetness. I just,
I actually have to say, I bought them for my daughter when it must have been when she got her braces on or something. She wasn't allowed to like eat the food. And I never buy them. Obviously, it's so odd. And so I bought, I was trying to find like things that were really soft. And I was like, oh, I can match them. And she like loves them. I was like, oh, okay. This is not like a real food. That is hilarious. Of all the crazy exotic things you've eaten, and peaches, no bueno. Okay, least favorite word.
Oh, God. Snuggle.
Snuggle.
Yeah, it's just gross. It just it's like bordering on baby talk. And then I don't like it.
Go pee and go snuggle.
Yeah.
Okay. I kind of agree in like an adult context. I guess okay. Yeah, like, want to snuggle? Okay, yeah, I see it. Okay, best piece of advice you've ever received. I wonder if it's the one that you talk about in the book, but who knows?
Well, I put it in my bio, and it definitely was the best piece of advice at that time was the first instructor I had at culinary school. It just said, don't freak out. Freaking out's not going to help. And it's hard advice to take when you're freaking out, but it was like, I think about that all the time. Just like, whatever is happening, if you panic, if you freak out, it's not going to get any better. Just try and take a breath and handle it. So, but with this heavy French accent, don't freak out.
I feel like it's even more impactful with the heavy French accent.
Yeah.
Picturing a chef's hat and chef's coat happening. Okay. If your personality were a flavor, what would it be?
I have this Fruit Riot. Do you know Fruit Riot? It's like frozen fruit that's coated with sour candy powder or something. I mean, it's sort of like if you don't want to eat candy, but you love candy, it's a little healthier. I think it's kind of like, it is sweet, but it's also like quite acidic. I think at my core, I'm a marshmallow and I'm sensitive, but I can be very prickly and sort of sarcastic. And I'm always looking for the joke, and even in the darkest things, I'm going to make some, at least in my mind, I'm going to make like a very inappropriate joke.
Okay, is there a specific flavor of Fruit Riot, or is it?
Well, mango, yeah, which is pretty sweet. Yeah, it's the only one that I've bought because the idea of frozen grapes just seems, I think, in the same vein as canned peaches, frozen grapes seems like not a texture I want to mess with.
Okay. Last Supper, it's not sad. We're just graduating to the next realm. This is celebratory. This is fun. What are you eating tonight?
Lasagna bolognese with fresh mozzarella and good Parmesan cheese grated over it with chicken liver in the bolognese sauce. Oh. The recipe is in Appetite's a cookbook.
Okay.
And tres leches cake.
Ooh.
Like super moist tres leches cake.
Okay. Are you drinking anything?
Coke Zero.
Coke Zero. Nice. I like it. Okay. Can you recall a moment in your life where you've had to eat your words?
Yeah, I mean, this is dark, but probably when my now ex-husband confronted me with all of the evidence of my wrongdoing, which I had committed to paper myself, and he happened to find. Yeah, just sort of admitting what a bad wife and liar I had been. So, dark.
Just kind of shove that back in.
Yeah.
So if you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, it's going to sustain you. Don't worry. You don't have to worry about like a balanced nutritional. Mm-hmm. What would you eat all day, every day while you're watching your Bravo?
Yeah. Peeps, marshmallow Peeps.
Oh my God. My mom loves those.
Love Peeps. Yeah.
All day, every day, huh? Don't they give you that like hitting on your teeth?
Yeah, I mean, eventually like the roof of your mouth gets cut up. What I like to do is either let them sit out and get a little bit stale and crunchy, or I stick them in the freezer and then they're like a chewier texture. So yeah.
Are you okay with the no longer just Easter Peeps? Are you okay with the Christmas Peeps and the Thanksgiving, the Halloween Peeps?
Yes.
Are you happy? Is that a good thing?
Yeah. Every time I go to visit my dad, there will be Peeps there. He knows that that's my favorite. So he'll go out and get whatever the seasonal Peeps are. Or if they're not available, he will get whatever the seasonal candy corn is, because that's my other big favorite.
Wow.
Yeah. Sugar addict.
Okay. Okay, where is your happy place?
Oh, gosh, there's a couple of them. Sitting on the couch with my son, we eat dinner on the couch every night, like absolute animals, because we can. Just hanging out, like he'll put on an NBA game and we'll watch a quarter or half of an NBA game and maybe talk a little bit, but also just sort of like just that camaraderie of watching sports with another person. And, I understand it enough, basketball is not that hard for me to understand. So that's one. And the other one is my boyfriend has a beautiful grown-up apartment in Manhattan that he just had renovated that is like, I get so much more work done there. I just feel like I'm not a mom. I'm not responsible for the space. And I can just go in there and sit with my computer and get, solid 2 hours of good concentration done in this very nice apartment.
Ooh, that sounds lovely.
Yeah.
What did you have for dinner last night?
Last night, I went to a restaurant called Ernesto's in Manhattan. I happened to be working on a cookbook with the chef of Ernesto's. So when I go, it's like the whole menu's on the table. Mm-hmm. So we were with a couple who the woman is a pescatarian. So I thought, oh no, there's a lot of pork on this menu. But we were able to eat very well, having everything. So we had, for instance, there's an appetizer that's called pincho matrimonio. That's puff pastry with 2 different kinds of anchovies and a garlic and parsley sauce. And it's like the best couple of bites you've ever put in your mouth ever. We had some beautiful tuna loin. We had a pasta, Basque cheesecake. I mean, way too much food, but we managed to take it down.
Delicious.
Yeah, really good.
Okay, what do you wear when you feel like you need to take on the world? Like you're going into your publisher to pitch your next book, or you're going on a hot date, or like, what do you put on your body?
I'm so not fashion, but I have I have winter pants and summer pants, and they're kind of the same. They're like a little bit high-waisted, black, and they go well with a pair of Doc Marten boots. They're not lace-up boots, but like slip-on boots that to me are like the fanciest shoes that I own. So, my power pants.
Your power pants.
And, I have this turtleneck sweater that I've been wearing all winter, and it's super cozy, but it also looks much more polished than anything else that I own. So when it's cold, this turtleneck sweater, and when it's a little warmer, I did hire a stylist last year for book tour stuff, and she convinced me to get a very expensive and totally nothing, 2 cents worth of cloth, beautiful silk camisole, and a structured jacket. So if it's warmer, I'll put on those things. I hate dressing up. And but if I have somebody that tells me, buy this, just put it on and don't think about it, I'm very happy.
And do you feel different when you put those pieces on?
Yeah, I feel more polished. I feel like I look like a grown-up, like I don't have cat hair on me, And the hair, too, I think is important. I mean, I will go and if I have an appearance. I did a reading last Saturday, and I went and got a blowout. And that also, I feel like my hair is my armor. And if I don't have to look good, I've got it up in a clip on top of my head because I don't want to think about it. But I feel like a polished hair and a clean face, a little mascara then I feel like I've got my armor on.
I imagine there's been many, but can you think of one of the most memorable meals you've ever had?
I talk about this in the book. I went to Tokyo in 2016 with Tony, and there was an evening where his crew hadn't arrived in the city yet, and he had a night off. And I was always ready to sort of stand back and say, do your own thing. I don't want to bother you. I mean, you're so busy. He was like, no, let's go out to eat. And so we did what I think has become known as a bang bang, where we had 2 dinners in a row. We had just super simple grilled yakitori, chicken on a stick, pork on a stick, and some beers. I was still drinking then. And that was great. And then we crossed the street and had big bowls of ramen. And it was simple, but he was so happy. He was happy to be showing someone Tokyo for the first time. And the food was delicious. And for whatever reason, nobody bothered him. He didn't have the same kind of profile in Tokyo that he did in New York. So 1 or 2 people were like, hey, that guy. But mostly he was just a civilian enjoying a simple meal. And I just made me really happy.
I loved that part of the book. I was like, that sounds fun. That sounds like a fun night.
Yeah.
Okay, go-to coping mechanism on a bad day. So shit is going sideways. God knows what's going on. The Real Housewives is not working to make things better. What do you do?
Some combination of a cookie and a nap. Like a toddler.
I love that. A cookie and a nap.
Yes.
What kind of cookie? Any kind of cookie?
Sometimes I'll buy that, like the pre-portioned, it's so trashy, but I love it. The Pillsbury, like just sugar cookies, like very basic. And they're frozen or they're in the refrigerator. You can put them in the freezer, and I'll just do 1 or 2 at a time. They're little. I'll put them in my toaster oven, and I have figured out exactly, what temperature waits 12 minutes or whatever for these little sugar cookies. And it's so easy. And I don't think you can make a better sugar cookie than the, chemical conglomerate of Pillsbury baking. Or there's a couple of great bakeries in my neighborhood, so I'll go and, pick up whatever looks good to me. Yeah.
I love it. Such a sweet tooth.
I have such a sweet tooth. I mean, I think I did while I was still drinking, but then definitely once I stopped drinking, it was like, there's a lot of sugar and alcohol. I was like, you got to get it somewhere. And I've gone through periods of like no sugar for me. When cutting out sugar was the diet Vogue, maybe 10 or 8 years ago, I was, really tried very hard to be all in on that. But I don't know. I've gotten to a place of just moderation now. I'm not ODing on sugar, but sugar is definitely drug of choice.
We will need our vices somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. Dream dinner party guest list, dead or alive. Who would you invite?
I think it would be Tony Bourdain. Obviously, I want to have him back. And then my friend Helen, who was good friends and close associate with Tony as well, because the two of them together were so funny. And, I just love her. And Helen's new puppy. And my boyfriend, because he would get along well with both of them, and my son, because I think he's old enough now to be a good, he shines when there's other people around, and he's really funny. So it would be, friends and family and Tony.
That sounds really fun. I think that sounds like a really great dinner. So lastly, what is one thing for sure that you know right now, today? You don't have to know it tomorrow. You didn't have to know it yesterday, just right now. In this moment, what feels true and sure to you?
Nothing is going to happen in my life that would be made better by picking up a drink or picking up a drug.
Wow.
Yeah.
It must feel good to know that.
Yeah.
That's huge. Can you please tell the nice people who are listening where they can find you, social media, websites, where they can learn about what's coming next when this new book comes out?
Yeah.
They can buy your other books.
So I have a personal website that's just lauriewoolever.com, and I keep any upcoming readings and events updated there, along with book links and things I've published. I'm very active on Instagram, to the point where I've had to set like a hard time limit because I'll just sit there all day. But I really love posting weird, absurd stuff in my stories. And I do also post things I've written, again, upcoming events, but I try and make it really weird and funny and entertaining. And there's a lot of weird stuff out there if your algorithm gets a sense that that's what you're into. So I'm at Laurie Woolever on Instagram. And I do a monthly contribution to a website/newsletter called Flaming Hydra. It's a collectively owned publication. There's got about 50 really talented writers doing monthly contributions. So it comes as a newsletter once a day, and it's very cheap. It's only $36 for the year, which is cheaper than any Substack I've ever seen. And it's truly some incredible journalism from a lot of different viewpoints.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking this time. Thank you for joining me in this conversation and for sharing your story. I know that people are going to be inspired by it. I hope everyone goes out and reads her books because they're really beautiful.
Coming out in paperback on April 28th.
Oh, Care and Feeding is?
Yes.
Okay, Care and Feeding, I have it in hardbound, but it's coming out on paperback soon. So go to your local bookseller and buy it from there. Thank you so much for sharing your time, for sharing your story, for sharing your words. This has been a real gift, so I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Oh, that was amazing. I could sit and talk to her for hours about just food. I mean, imagine just like all the incredible meals she's had. As always, I hope you guys were inspired or ignited by this conversation and that you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you know somebody or there's somebody in your real life that you think might benefit from this conversation or just enjoy it or might need a little inspiration, please send it to them. You can copy and paste it from your media player. You can copy and paste it into a text, into an email, into a DM. You can post it on your social media, which helps us tremendously. And if you're not doing so already, please follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Eat My Words, the podcast, all one word. And we will catch you on the next one. The Eat My Words podcast has been created and directed by me, Joanna Olmstead. Our producer is Sophie Druin. Our audio editor is Isabel Robertson. And our brand manager is Mila Bujna.